I'm Ken Fjord. Last year, I wrote a book for my son entitled The Graysonian Ethic, Lessons for My Unborn Son, in the months before he was born. Once he was born, I published the book on Amazon. He's now a happy bouncing baby, and I've decided to release the audiobook version for free on YouTube. How to Perform Miracles. As a relatively humble person, I don't like to talk about this too much. But there are things that people spend their entire lives wishing that they had been able to do that I've done. I went from being so overweight I stepped on the scale and saw, to be continued, to having a six-pack. I went from having basically no work experience to being one of the highest paid people in the country. I've actually accomplished what a lot of people consider impossible. The white picket fence, the house and the stay-at-home wife. I learned a lot of respect for myself, and if you're reading this, I've even gotten a book published. All these things are things that are sort of considered miracles today. Besides that, I've been able to reproduce the miracle in others. One friend of mine was working at Cop USA. It was a computer store that has long since gone out of business. And with a little bit of advice I was able to help him go out and get some serious career jobs. Today he's a top IT guy for a major US university. In another case, I knew someone who was quite overweight and didn't think that they'd be able to lose that weight. By giving them a little bit of advice, I was able to help them lose massive amounts of weight and become physically fit to the point that they became a black sash martial artist. There's been a couple of times where I took virgins and was able to help them very quickly find not just hookups, but fulfilling relationships. The reason I've been able to pass on the miracle is that miracles don't happen by accident. To be totally honest, if you put the time in and the effort in, most people can make miracles happen. The thing is, most people don't want to put the effort in, often because they don't realize that it can work. So the first step of making any miracle happen must be pre-planning. Whatever you're trying to do, somebody has probably done it before. If they haven't done it before, maybe they've done something like it. The thing to realize then is to look at what others have done and try to boil it down to a few key steps. Something that you can do. When I was losing weight, I ended up reading all about the science, and it basically told me to eat less. Even better, I was able to figure out more or less how much less I needed to eat. From there, I had a very simple game plan. Eat less. In the case of losing weight, that first step is the most important, and the one that most people get wrong. For whatever reason, most people end up focusing on exercise. Now exercise is great, it makes you feel better and it strengthens you up. It has a lot of good things about it. The problem is using exercise for weight loss. There are two problems. First, exercise doesn't lose you that much weight. If you are comparing the two methods, eating less is infinitely easier than working your butt off. You could work every single day forever and it would be the same as not eating a couple bags of chips. Second, the point that you need to lose weight is usually the point when you can't really exercise all that much. It's all good and dandy to say you'll go out for a 10-kilometer bike ride. But if you weigh some absurd amount, you just don't have that kind of strength. The amount of effort goes way up as the amount of mass you represent also goes up. So, it's always best to start off with weight loss by managing your diet, and then later on switching to exercise as diet eventually has diminishing returns and your body is more capable of actually doing exercise without harming itself. As for a career, that was a little bit more difficult. Sometimes you have to change plans midstream. When I was going to high school, we were in the middle of the dot-com bubble and everybody told me that computer skills were going to be the thing that made me my fortune. The year I graduated from high school, the dot-com bubble had already burst and a lot of computer guys were having a very hard time finding work. So I had to change plans. Instead of getting into high technology, I went to mid-technology. I ended up saving up a whole lot of money, working hard for a terrible job, and with that additional money I was able to go to college. Unfortunately, that wasn't really the end of that story, but we'll talk about that shortly. You note here that the hard work is important, but it's only really important once you're in a situation that is something you can succeed at. There is simply no amount of work that I could have done in the remaining hours of the day to pass the program I was in the first time. Despite a lot of hard work, I ended up having to turn right around and try again somewhere else. And it was hard work. I always say that I am really dumb, and people think I'm a lot smarter than I am because I work extremely hard. So, once you have the plan, you have to start executing it. That's where the hard work comes in, and the most important thing during the execution phase is to keep at it. Human beings are a very peculiar evolutionary branch. Most people don't know why human beings lost all of their hair. The reason is that the hair follicles became sweat glands. Human beings ended up becoming creatures with the most endurance out there. A human being in good shape probably can't outrun anything else out there, but it can run longer. There are races between horses and humans, long-distance races. Whereas the horses need to be under constant veterinary surveillance, the humans make it to the finish line tired. But, generally speaking, they're just fine. This is our superpower as a species, and that superpower extends to everything else. Yes, human beings will spend 12 hours a day building something for months at a time, and just consider that to be normal. Yes, human beings will spend 16 years in school, and that absurd amount of work is just considered normal. Yes, human beings will dedicate their entire lives to studying some tiny little facet of this great universe, and that's just considered normal. Human beings have written documents that are hundreds of pages long that virtually no one will ever look at. I've done that a huge number of times. It's just a matter of sitting down, doing it and putting in the time and putting in the effort. This key element, endurance and sticking to your plans over the long term, is how you make miracles happen. A lot of people look at people who have accomplished great things and assume that it was something that just happened. It didn't just happen. What inevitably occurred was, someone put in a whole lot of work for a really long time, and little by little they got better. And little by little they built something amazing. I once got into long-distance cycling. At the peak of my physical fitness, I could easily go for hours at a time. I rode well over 100 kilometers in a single day, and the next day I was just fine and ready to go again. You might look at me in that time and say, well, this guy was just born like that. And absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, when I hit that peak performance, I had just a few months prior been so overweight the scale wouldn't measure my weight. Losing the weight was obviously a big part of it, and that took a lot of sticking to the plan. It was very difficult, but that miracle didn't happen on its own. It happened because every single day I woke up and followed the plan all day, and then a week occurred, and then a month, and then 6 months, and then a year, and at that point I was skinny. The thing is, just because you're skinny doesn't mean you're in good shape. So, I went out and started with a little tiny bike ride. I just went into town around the block a few times and came back home. And then over the course of months I would slowly increase the amount of distance that I would ride. And eventually, that distance got so far that it wasn't my endurance holding me back. It was literally the amount of time that it would take for me to ride my bike back home because I had driven so far away from home. It took a long time, and I had to stick to it. There were a lot of things that I wanted to do that I didn't get to do because I was focused on achieving my goals. And eventually, I hit my peak of fitness. Along the way, it wasn't easy. Human beings may be blessed with a mighty endurance, but that doesn't mean that difficult things are easy. It just means that if you power through it and do your best, you can put all that effort in. And sometimes you're going to get sweaty. Sometimes your muscles are going to ache. Do you know what happens when your body uses up all of its sugars? It's terrible. Sugar is a very high energy fuel source, and it does things very fast. You can move quickly in short bursts if you have lots of sugar. However, eventually your blood runs out of sugar because it also gets used up very fast. At that time, you end up hitting a wall. Seasoned athletes call this bonking. It's incredible, you can still move, but you literally don't have any power. Everything goes slower, and your vision starts to change. It turns green from the lack of sugar. You just feel exhausted. It feels like there's something seriously wrong with you when, in reality, it's just your body has switched from burning sugars to burning fats. It isn't pleasant, but you're going to live. In the process of switching from burning sugars to burning fats, you go from being able to move around for a short period of time in quick bursts to being able to move for a very long time steadily and consistently moving forward. It'll hurt and it'll suck, but at the end of the day in our time before agriculture, it would mean the difference between living and dying. Everyone that came before you is around today solely because they were able to push through that. So you have a plan, and you're following it. Seems like that's where the conversation should end, right? Well, almost. The third step has to be being prepared to change plans. In my professional career, I've had to do this a couple times. But to me, the most important example was before I started my professional career. I had been saving for a long time and I moved in order to go to college. But unfortunately, what I didn't realize is there was simply no way for me to graduate from college under those conditions. The commute was too long. I didn't have enough time to just buckle down and do the work. There was simply no way for me to succeed. So, I came up with a new plan. I went back home and saved up some money for a few months and applied for a new college somewhere that I could be more in control of how my life went. After that pivot, I was able to successfully graduate from college. Even though it wasn't easy. Don't get me wrong, and I was able to move on to the next step. In another direction, just now I talked about becoming a long-distance cyclist. That wasn't in the original plan. Originally, my plan was focused almost exclusively on diet because when you're very fat, you can't really exercise. Moving around too much when you're too overweight will physically damage your body, and it's counterproductive. My original plan was focused entirely on losing weight through diet. What happened along the way is, I suddenly realized that by losing all that weight, I had all of this new energy. All that energy wanted to go somewhere, and that's where I took the opportunity. Instead of just letting it go to waste, I started riding my bike to burn it off. That's what let me take that moment in my life and not just become skinny, but to overall end up reaching the best physical shape of my life by not just being skinny, but also being muscular. So the final step is something that I think is important because I know that I've been guilty of this. You have to make it to the end. There are people who have half-finished miracles everywhere. A half-finished miracle isn't a miracle. It's just an abandoned plan. It is very easy, and most people end up making this mistake. They end up doing 90% of the work, and when they see the end in sight, they give up. A mathematician named Pareto in Italy discovered that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the landowners. This distribution has been called the Pareto distribution. The Pareto distribution applies to a lot of different things. In general, you can always expect that 20% of the work is going to take 80% of the effort. Therefore, a lot of people will end up putting in the 20%, getting to 80%, and then stopping because they're happy with their progress. This isn't how you perform miracles. This is how you waste your time not accomplishing things. If you're going to do something, do it right. See it through to the end. If you really want it, then be prepared to put in the effort and cross the finish line. Once you've crossed the finish line, you've got that forever. Even if it's something like fitness where you have to keep it up forever or you lose it, you will always be able to look back and know that you succeeded in creating a miracle. And just like I said at the beginning of this, miracles don't happen by accident. So, how do you make a miracle happen? It really isn't that complicated. You do your legwork to make sure that you have a plan that can work. You follow your plan, keep following your plan for a really long time. You course correct along the way to fix things that aren't going to work. You take advantage of new opportunities that have presented themselves that you didn't know about earlier. And you stick with it till the end to make sure that your miracle actually happens. Thanks for listening to this chapter of the Graysonian Ethic, Lessons for My Unborn Son. If you like the book and would like a physical copy or an electronic copy, please look it up. It's available on Amazon around the world. Barring that, please like and share with others. I'll be releasing one chapter every week, so if it hasn't been completely released. If you're interested in hearing more, you can subscribe to see when I post additional chapters.